Hello, everyone. This is the Crushing Iron podcast.
Today, April 26th, 2022. Welcome aboard, everybody. As Mike said, this is the Crushing Iron podcast, episode 576.
It is.
It's a rainy and gloomy day here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Hope you're having a little bit of sunshine in your week. For those of you that are tuning in today for your first time, welcome. We appreciate you giving us your time. We know you have a lot of options in the triathlon podcast universe and just podcasts in general, and your time is valuable, so we appreciate tuning in today. We cover it all. We'll do swim, bike, and run specific podcasts. We'll do race recaps. We'll also do race previews. But for the most part, Mike and I, as coaches, athletes, best friends, humans on this planet, just sit back, relax, have an open, honest discussion about what we're going through as people and as coaches and athletes ourselves. We talk a lot about what our athletes are going through. Frequently, we work with a wide range of athletes all across the globe, from beginner level athletes looking to their first sprint or 5K, all the way up to the top to elite level amateurs that went and take overall wins and trying to get back to Kona, and all those awesome people in between. We'll use the discussions we have with them and all the things they're going through, again, both in training and in life, to drive the topic of the day. We'll also head into our Facebook group, which is a really awesome and helpful community. You can go on Facebook and search Crushing Iron Group, answer one simple question, we'll let you right in. And again, it is a very, very helpful community. A lot of awesome people in there, very seasoned. Again, just like the athletes we work with, and the people who listen to this podcast, it's anyone and everyone, from beginners, people interested in looking to do a triathlon, all the way up to people that have won Ironman races and everyone in between. So everyone's willing to help out. So if you're in there, don't be afraid. Ask questions. It's a lot more informative and safer community to get feedback that's actionable and proven than a YouTube Google search of how to get faster next triathlon. You get like 95 different answers. So hop in there, and sometimes we'll do Q&As that'll drive the topic of the day. But that's it. We don't have any sponsors. We don't have any ads, but we do have one agenda, and that's to keep you happy and healthy in your endurance sports journey.
I'm glad you mentioned humans on this planet, because I'm definitely feeling like a human on this planet.
Human, right? And I will, especially if it's your first time, I will give a lot of times you can put like explicit lyrics on podcast titles, and like, don't listen if it's going to be a lot of F-bombs, which sometimes we do.
Yeah, two.
Yeah,
it's like our big explicit.
It's our big. Yeah, we drop one, be like, oh, they are on fire today. But yeah, if you're tuning in today to get your top 10 tricks for a faster T1 or a bunch of triathlon advice, we have 575 other podcasts that really cover that. But today's not going to be about that. And I do want to say out of the gate that one of the things I've always been thankful for with the podcast that we do is that we never started it out and tied it specifically to, we had to talk about only triathlon, right? And that's been, I think, my most favorite thing about what we've been able to do in this podcast and the community we've created, is that it's not just been about travel, it's been about life, and having the flexibility and the opportunity to talk and to vent and to feel and to be vulnerable and to work through things on a platform like this that's not just about watts and pace and power and race recaps and pro interviews, because we're all going through shit. We all have stuff, and so I'm super appreciative that we, I think accidentally, but just kind of organically, as most of our conversations have always gone, is just kind of a little bit of triathlon and a whole lot of life. Which is, if you think about it, the structure and layout of your week, it's that, right? It's a little bit of triathlon, a whole lot of life. When sometimes I think we lose focus of the percentage and what's weighted behind those. And we had mentioned last week, and a lot of you are probably looking forward to Ironman Texas recap. I was headed to go down there. I'll go down here in a little bit, but that'll be Thursday. We will come to you on Thursday. I'll do a very extensive recap and I do want to say out of the gate, because we're not going to talk a whole lot about triathlon today, mad props to everybody that went out there and raced and made it across the finish line. It was very, very hard conditions, like a lot of Ironmen are, right? It was hot. It was insanely windy, and we had a ton of athletes down there. And I talked to athletes that were towards the front and towards the back, and they all kind of said, I got popped in the mouth, right? It was just a really, really, really hard day. I had a lot of observations, although I wasn't there in person, like I planned to be. I have a ton of observations and a lot of shout outs to a lot of our athletes and those that finished, but a lot to be had from that, and hopefully a lot of lessons to be learned. So again, if you got out there and raced, good on you. But as I discussed last week, I think we recorded the Ironman Texas preview cast on Tuesday?
Yeah, I think
Tuesday. So we got it. So we haven't cast in about a week. I was set to head out early Wednesday morning about 3:30 to make my trip down to Texas, check in, do a little team dinner on Thursday, and a bunch of other things. Honestly, really been looking forward to this race for years. I was super excited about it, and Allie was going to be out of town till Sunday. Her dad was coming in, and let me go ahead and preface this super quick. If you are a dog lover, either get your tissues out or just don't listen, because it might be an emotional one. I know it will be for me. But Tuesday night, I was putting Hayden to bed. Allie was already gone. She's been gone till Sunday, and her dad was there. He was going to hang out with Hayden till Sunday when she got back. I wasn't going to be back till Monday, and I was putting Hayden to bed. He doesn't like it when we're gone. I mean, he's a typical kid that's under the certain age, right? Because at some point they'd be like, see you later, don't come back for 2 weeks, like house parties, right? Like we did. Yep. And I was like, be gone. What time are you back specifically? So we can like clean up the house and make sure it's all looking. But he doesn't like it when we go. I think a lot of that is because of his age, but then a lot of it also is because, you go through a year and a half where you especially for a kid, Hayden is, he doesn't have your brothers and sisters. And so basically like as parents, especially through the pandemic with everything that was going on, it wasn't just, we were also, his parents, but also his play pals, right? He wasn't doing anything anyway. So I think that definitely has exacerbated kind of the attachment and separation he kind of has. But Tuesday night when I was putting him to bed, it was just different. It was, and I'm not the most intelligent human being by any stretch. But I've always had a pretty good gut on me. And he was very upset Tuesday night, incredibly upset, and said a lot of things that just stuck with me and it's just different. And I ended up making the very difficult decision that even though I'd just done a podcast, 5 hours before that was like, hey, I'm on my way down. Our athletes expected me there as a coach, that I made the decision as a father that I couldn't do it. I couldn't leave. He didn't know that. He fell asleep like crying that night, and woke up like every hour just to kind of check and see if I was there. And then ultimately, I sent Allie's dad home, just said, I'm going to stay. So Wednesday, came in here and, you were like, hey, do we need to edit the podcast? Do we need to, train? I was like, no, just leave it. It's just life, right? We've never edited a podcast ever. Right. And we weren't editing then. And it was definitely disappointed. Sent an email out to the team, and obviously everybody was super understanding. You gotta be a father, you gotta make, the right decisions. And I'll admit, it was just super hard. It was a really, really, really difficult decision. And one of those that I felt like was kind of a lose-lose, right? Like you maybe disappoint people who, there's quite a few athletes that I hadn't had the opportunity to meet, before. And I was looking forward to that. I know they were too. And so I was disappointed, but it was also really hard to see Hayden like that in a different way. It just hit me. It was all different. And Wednesday, normal day, came in here. He was at school, came in here, brought Kona in, living in the townhouse right now. So she's been coming to work with me. Her and Maddie been kind of playing and doing their thing. And she's old. I mean, she was old. And but went to bed Wednesday night and woke up Thursday morning. Hayden is a pretty early riser, as you know. But he was dead asleep. Of course, it was 4, so most people on this planet were dead asleep. And I just had this feeling that it was time to get up for whatever reason. I didn't know why. I mean, it's not unheard of for me to get up at 4. 5 is pretty much standard, but like this morning, 4 o'clock. Got up, went downstairs, first thing as always, and I hadn't even put on I just had my boxers on and my shirt. I wasn't going to let Kona out for a long walk because it was way too early for that. But it was just Hayden at home. I didn't want to go on a walk and have him wake up and me not be there. So anyway, I just walked downstairs and she left her crate, ran downstairs. Like always, can't wait to pee, been hanging out all night, waiting to pee. And, I put leash on her, walked her outside. And then she peed and pooped, came back inside. And then about 3 or 4 steps inside the door, we had a little entry rug, mat or whatever that most people have. She just laid down, and she's I mean, obviously she's old, so she's had her, health issues. 12 is a pretty old for a lab. But she had been, the health issues been in months, but she laid down, and I kind of thought maybe, maybe her leg was hurting, and just kind of bent down on the floor, and just had that feeling in my gut that this wasn't good. And then, so, I won't get into too much detail, but, and then out of nowhere for the next, 15 to 20 minutes, as I was desperately from the townhouse. I'm on the bottom floor. Hayden was asleep on the third. It's like one of those, tall skinnies, just begged for her not to go. And just kind of laid her head in my lap like she's always done. And then at some point I just noticed that she was gone. And it was, probably and I've had a lot of excruciating moments in my life. I don't know of another one. Because it just of how unexpected it was and abrupt it was. And, here we are. We're not a week out, but we're getting closer and still devastated. And she was gone, and she left us. And I will say I was, I want to talk a little bit about her, because obviously if you haven't gotten the picture yet, today's podcast is our second ever dog cast, and it's just going to be about my dog. And lessons I don't know that I can't remember the last time I've cried that hard. Luckily one of our friends was able to come over. It's like 4:50 in the morning, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, and just be there while I was, loaded Kona in the back of my car and wrapped her up in one of Hayden's little shark blankets, and then drove to the vet ER place, which is like 2 miles down the road. There's like no traffic, obviously. They were able to come out and meet me and take her, and I was able to say some final goodbyes and then actually make it home before Hayden woke up. And I was able to kind of play it off. It gave me some time to kind of get my shit together, for lack of a better word. And then, cause it would have been devastating for him had he witnessed the whole thing and specifically like heard the amount of, if you've ever lost a dog or a person you love, the amount of bawling and boo-hooing I was doing, on the first floor. And so he woke up and just told me, he went to the vet, or she went to the vet, check on it. And of course that was upsetting, but, it has been devastating for me, to be honest. Before we cast it, I went to the vet and picked up her ashes and a few nice things they were able to do for her. And it's really, put a lot of things in perspective for me. I said this in kind of the weekly email I sent it to our athletes, and I got her, she was 12. I got her before. I always kind of joked, she's my longest standing relationship, outside of family. Mm-hmm. Like family, they're forced to stick around just because they're family, they just kind of happen. But in terms of my longest standing relationship, she was it. Because frankly, there wasn't really many people who want to stick around the way I was when I was an alcoholic, or was before I got sober. And I got her in a, very, very difficult time in my life. And, I said this in my, email, that she was about 2 to 3 when I went to treatment, and for those 2 to 3 years, she probably kept me alive. I was an isolated drinker, like a lot of people who drink are, and I would go home and she'd always be there. She never, even though she rightfully so, she could have judged me. She didn't judge me. She just would lay there on the couch. She'd slept with me. She was just always there looking at me. She was like the one thing I was capable of like taking care of. It was, 'cause I was definitely not doing a good job taking care of me. And she was always there. And I remember there were so many, she's a perfect dog for me in the period of life I was in, and then afterwards, and great family dog, but she'd always be there when I would come home. She would never judge me in the morning, but there were so many countless nights that I would, that I'd come home and obviously drunk and just know that I was in pain and know that I was struggling, and, obviously couldn't ask for help at that point. But she would just lay there with me and lay her head on my lap and look at me. And it was honestly like the only kind of real, like, unconditional love that I actually felt, like the actually kind of feeling I had at that time. And I don't know what would have happened to me if I didn't have her, if I just kind of felt lost. And I remember when I was family in this, like, intervention or whatever, and to the reason I went to treatment, but she was like the main reason I didn't want to go. I was like, no. My first question was, when they're like, it's time to go, my first question was like, not like how long I have to be there, or how am I going to do it, or I was like, what about Kona? I was like, who's going to take care of her? And they're like, we got it covered. And I was going to watch her. And then obviously, when I got out, she was still there and recognized me. And she, a lot of people I think take walks, when they're going through hard times, and talk through things and people. And she was always there, going on walks and just kind of a silent listener and comforting, and great with our family, great with Hayden. And Hayden was obviously, I will say it's as hard as he took it, and that, and subsequently all of the questions that come from where is she, where did she go? It's his real first loss, and his first loss period in life. And, is she in heaven? What does heaven look like? Is she in the cloud? All these kind of different things, are we ever going to see her again? All the things you're like, gosh, I can't even like grieve. I'm trying to answer all these questions. And, but it's been it's been a genuinely special experience with him in a lot of ways, because I've always, like, growing up in the family that I had, which is, I don't know, my mom listens to this podcast sometimes, but so Mom, I love you, it's not your fault. But growing up in Southern Church of Christ, you can have feelings, just don't have all of them, and just kind of shield them, and don't really show people what's really going on in your world. Keep the status quo. And that's something that I've tried really hard with him, is to just be outwardly emotional and show him that it's okay to cry and it's okay to be emotional. And so when Allie was still out of town, so we told him together while she was on the phone, and then the rest of the night he was obviously super upset and asking a lot of questions. And then the next day, because I'll have like periods of time where I'm okay and I keep myself busy, and then I'll start crying again for a reason, but just kind of out of the blue. And I think it was Sunday, I think. We were sitting there and I was just getting emotional or something. He and I were talking about Kona, and my eyes got kind of watery, and he looked up at me and he said, Dad, it's okay to cry. And I said, why? Can you tell? And he said, yeah. He said, your eyes are getting all, he said, your eyes are doing that thing, where they get all watery. And I said, I appreciate that in your eyes. I said, it's okay to cry. Cause I had been telling him that when I told him about her passing, and that it was okay to cry and show those feelings and emotions, and they were perfectly normal. And so I just lost it there and started crying. He kind of stared at me for a minute, and then he just kind of leaned in and like gave me a huge hug, like to comfort me. And it was one of those, it's just one of those moments as a dad I'll never forget, that he was able to reciprocate and like acknowledge the pain and the heartache I was going to. And then as a 5-year-old, knew the response was, not to say anything, but just, to give a hug, and to show that he was there. But yeah, it's been excruciating. It's weird. I was just kind of thinking about how all the things transpired, and what if he hadn't gotten upset, and what if I had gone, to Texas, and I don't know that I would have ever forgiven, myself if I hadn't have been there for her, because she had been so fine. It wasn't like she was, ill or sick. It was just kind of out of the blue. And I don't know what I would have done if my father-in-law would have called me like, hey, Kona, has passed away. Cause he wouldn't have woken up. He wouldn't have taken her out. Like it'd have been him and Hayden would have seen the whole, it would have been very, so as even, as such a kind, as labs are, a kind and compassionate and fun and loving, is even in her passing, she did her best to be kind and loving and compassionate by, letting Hayden speak for her, is what I honestly truly believe. Is she just kind of spoke through Hayden and was like, hey, don't tell him not to go. It's time, and protect you both, really, me from feeling tremendous guilt, but also to protect Hayden. And then, she did it at the farthest possible point in the house away from him. So he was, never had to go through that kind of traumatic experience that I did. And then, just the irony of waking up at 4 a.m, and taking her outside and like she rushed downstairs. It was like she knew it was almost time, and raced downstairs, which is again why it was so out of the blue, that she held on just long enough throughout the night to where we could, say goodbye, and just a feeling that I had at 4 to like, just go ahead and get up, and just how it all works out, and I have always, whether people think it's naive or you can search for things, I've always kind of felt that, the hardest things in life and the biggest moments in your life are meant because you need to be taught something. You need to, it's not in a vicious way, but that it's a lesson, and that's what I've tried to take. And unfortunately for me, I've always been kind of one of those stubborn people that it's usually taken like something really difficult to get the point across. But I think that's also been the hardest piece, is that, I wasn't, how little control we have over life, and how I think little we listen to ourselves sometimes because we're afraid what the repercussions might be. And I don't know the full lesson yet, just because I think I'm still grieving. And I remember I was begging her not to go. I mean, that's exactly what I was saying, and I think I was saying like, please don't go. I don't know what I remember saying a million times, I don't know what I'm going to do. Cause that's always I used to feel, and obviously she felt different that I was, I mean, I don't know what to make of that. But I do know that I have, at least since then, tried to be a hell of a lot more present, and appreciate the things in life, and not be so distracted, and sure as hell not taking things for granted. Which I think is something that, we do, and again, I think, obviously this is not triathlon related, but I think everyone in life has suffered loss, and that is like, I think someone posted like, and I rarely post on Facebook, but I did. And someone said, dogs give you 1,000,000 of the best days of your life and one of your worst. And I was like, 100%. Like that is exactly one of the worst. They are a family member, and closer than that, best friend. And so when you lose one, I guess it's how we should all be, kind, generous, compassionate, fun, and more importantly, not judgmental, and what that can do for someone, and not having to, and listening, right? It's like, dogs never talk back. They just sit there, right? They listen. I know how many conversations I've had with Kona where I just talked and talked and talked and talked and talked. And of course, no response, just, let you speak. And I think that's a lesson, and sometimes you don't need to have a response. Sometimes you just need to listen, and not have a rebuttal. And that I think listening is becoming a lost art. I try to do well at it, but I know I don't always. But that, but I think it's also important to, and this is, and I know a lesson I'm trying to do myself, and kind of one of the reasons I sent an email out to our team is communicate when things are hard. I don't think we do that enough. I think we get really caught up in being human, and personifying how tough we are and how resilient we are, and how well off we are. I mean, in a superficial way, like I can't tell you how many, the people in my life that I've come across, or their friends or acquaintances that I know that have all gone bankrupt. I thought they were loaded because of the lifestyle that they lived and what they portrayed. And so what you see isn't real. And I think one of the more important things in in life, and something that I know that we try to articulate and talk about on the podcast is that being vulnerable takes a hell of a lot of strength and a hell of a lot of courage. It takes more of that, more to be vulnerable and be honest than it does to just, be tough and roll things up. And, as a coach and, coaches looked at as leaders or as a father, it's like, you don't want to, you look like there's a chink in the armor or look like, maybe you're going to slack off this week because you're struggling. But I just flat out said to the team in an email, I was like, I need some slack. This week I'm not going to be at my best. I'm going to do my best, but I'm struggling. I am devastated. It's a gigantic loss for our family, and just wanted to let you know. And I think by doing that, you do a couple things. Is one, you show that you're human, right, and that you hurt. But then also, most importantly, and two things is you allow yourself the opportunity for other people to try and lift you up with kind words and support. And I've gotten so many emails and text messages, and, you've been incredible the last few days of always checking in on me. And, you tried to come over early that morning, ASAP. And so it allows us, I think, in a world where we try to do everything on our own, which I am infamous for trying to do everything on my own and just kind of take it. And, that asking for help is so huge in so many different ways in life. I think we always think that, asking for help means you're weak, but it really means that if you want to become stronger, then you have to ask for help, because we can't do anything on our own. And then I think it's just that it allows you the space. We always talk about, when people get injured, I think one of the very few podcasts I've ever had with somebody on was, Andrew Starkowitz said, when I get sick, I take 48 hours and do nothing, period, right off the bat, to allow myself the opportunity to get better faster. And I think that's a piece of this that I feel like is happening. Hopefully, that by telling people that I need time and the space to cope and to grieve, that it will allow me to get back quicker, as a functioning human. I've kept up with my job and done well, but it's people always ask, like, what's your limit for athletes? What's your limit for whatever? And I said, it's got nothing to do with data and training. It's mental and emotional bandwidth. Because and I've been very, very fortunate the last 3 to 4 years since we coached full time to have a wide, bandwidth to do that. But this week it's been more about, taking care of my own bandwidth and, what allowed me to get back to where I am. So, yeah, that's your tip on how to increase your 20 minute power for today.
Well, I mean, there's so much good stuff in there. And I think the one word that kept coming to me was vulnerability. And I think that, as coaches, as, triathletes and athletes that are always doing hard things. And, at least for myself, I kind of think that a lot of times I'm using that as kind of a buried desire to be appreciated or something like that. And sometimes it's very difficult to sort of, give yourself that respect and self-love and whatnot. And, that morning when you texted me, I think I saw the text that both you and Allie texted it. It was like 7:00, and I'm not typically up then.
No, you were not.
But for whatever reason, I mean, it was, I think you texted earlier, but I didn't see it till 7. And then immediately, I was like, it's that snap you out of the,
you're awake.
Yeah. Instantly,
Yeah.
So I didn't know what to do. You never know what to do, but the only thing I could think of was just say, hey, I'm coming over. And, you needed time with Hayden and stuff like that. And so, but
and you couldn't set a precedent for coming over to the house at 7 because Hayden would expect you to do that every day. So
yeah, that would have been,
it's looking out for you.
It would have been a flag. So it's like, but, a big part of that was I knew exactly what that meant to you. I mean, I knew, I've known forever that you knew that day was going to be one of the toughest ones of your life. And I immediately knew it was here. So I'm laying there, Jesus, cause like this thing, because we're so close and it hit. I mean, like I've been carrying this thing too. It's like, cause I have, so I just in some ways haven't known what to do. And I think that's just normal for us to be that way. I mean, like you said, with Hayden giving you the hug and stuff and just being silent and just being here and whatever, it's stuff we got to work through. I think that honestly for me, as I sat in it for that day, it was a wake up call for me too. And I think, the thing with life is that, death is there for a reason. I think it is to remind you to live in a lot of ways and appreciate what you have and not get so wrapped up in, this endless drive like, I don't know what it is. Like, I just feel like so many people just get out of the moment and don't appreciate what they have these days. And it's always more. And, there's nothing, but like the reality is just, we have to be there for each other and, appreciate simple things. And, as tough as a reminder as this kind of thing is, it definitely is part of life, right? I mean, we've all gone through it. Like you said, I've lost very close friends, my dad and whatever. And every time it's just sort of like, whoa, man, pull the reins back here and really appreciate it. And then you kind of start spinning out of control again eventually. And then it's like a reminder again. And, it's very difficult. And it's also like a major test of faith and all these other things. And it's like, boy, can we just ground ourselves in the fact that, none of us really know what the hell's going on. It's like if we don't, it's not about, accumulating the most followers. I don't think that's what the purpose of this thing is. So it's really important, I think, to, just sit in things like this and try to understand them and, just appreciate life out of it, I guess.
Yeah. And I think, and obviously if you're not a dog person or a pet person, like a lot of this is probably not making sense. But, I think one of the greatest things, and I'll be honest, like a lot of the struggle I've had, since she's been gone is, like, I wish I would have done this. I wish I would have done that. Yeah. It's like you have that, I wish we had taken a longer walk the day before or whatever. And you have that or you're so focused on the things you didn't do. But I think what the point is it's not spend so much time, even though, and like I said, I think it's totally normal to question and wonder, what could have you done? Or I think you're going to feel that no matter what. But I think hopefully what the point you need to get to, or myself, I'm speaking to myself here, is like, stop worrying about what you didn't do. And maybe the point is to focus on doing it differently going forward. Right. And not spending so much time wondering why you didn't do something in the past would make things different, going forward in the future, and how, and how important that is. And I think, again, if you've had a pet you love of any kind, it's because they can't speak to you, is the simplicity of it. That the relationship is it's always interesting because like you really hope they know how much you love them because you know how much they love you. And they don't do anything for you. They don't buy you gifts. They don't tell you how wonderful you are. They don't like your Facebook feed and your Instagram posts. They don't prop you up. It's just this very simple, reciprocated, unconditional, no strings attached love that you have for another animal or that people have for other people. But I think at the core of so much of what we try to do these days is we try so hard and we're not even really sure why, right? To do extra or to be extra or to offer more. It's like, cause it's going to make things, but and honestly, I think one of the greatest compliments that I think we have and that we get as coaches is not just the benefit from offering people the opportunity to express fitness and be injury free and increase their performance is to hopefully do our part to, allow them to be better people, and it's not, we don't specifically make people better. I don't think we have that power. I do feel like all coaches, and I think people have the opportunity and responsibility to help steer people in that direction. to bring up things, to question things, to, say things that make people think, or to remove stress, and to create pathways towards success and positivity, and to become, because the more resilient and tough, and that's, something I want to talk a lot about Thursday, is just how resilient and tough people are, and how that makes or breaks everything. Fitness is almost meaningless in an Ironman if you don't have it from the chin up. And I think getting people to realize their full potential in how tough they are, and how incredible of an athlete and of a person that they are, without getting in our own way. Because obviously, I totally believe our thoughts are our biggest enemy, right? Outside of shame and guilt, which I think are mass destructive weapons, I think people's self-doubt and self-destruction comes from their thoughts, right? Which is your mind, right? And something you can't ever get rid of. You're always gonna have a conversation with it. And so that is a way you can help, kind of clear the path and clean up the litter of our lives, which is, all these things that are just put there for us to kind of trip over and get in our own way and slip on. And that, it really just comes down to, support and love and trying not to be too much, and spending more time, right, on the things that matter and not the things that don't matter, right? I think we can all agree, but like you said, the ultimate test is how long and how much you can do it before you need another reminder, right? And I think that's been, part of the last week for me, is if I found myself going back to doing something that, wasn't, it's like, but it's people think it's funny unless you have a dog, and you're like, what would Kona want? And you're like, that's not what you want. And they can do this or do that. And even in people's passings, which is the same as in dogs and pets and family and friends, loss, death, disappointment, all those things, DNFs, injuries, whatever it is, job loss, whatever it is, all these things have a purpose, and I don't think that's necessarily a spiritual only thing. I just truly believe that there is a point and there's a purpose if you choose to look for it, right? If it's to make progress. And I've always used the worst period of my life before I got sober, even a few years after, that was so hard. I was like, I always kind of say, which it's hard for people to wrap their brain around, I think, is I'm so grateful that I went through that, because I don't think I would be where I am had I not, right? Because but they were hard, right? And they affected other people different ways, and they affected you in different ways. But I was thankful that I had those times, because had I not, kind of going back to, I was so stubborn and so, that's, I've always found that with alcoholics or people that are, have issues that, they're people who have a really, really, really deep rock bottom, kind of like I had. The depth of your bottom is, pretty much in line with your inability to recognize how bad you need it, right? How bad, you need help, and that your bottom was synonymous with, man, I was so stubborn. And so, my ego was out of control. My alcoholism, it's like everything is I needed that huge swing of the fence to be to bring me back into, I needed things to be really, 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 really hard on me in my first 90 days of getting sober. And I honestly believe if they hadn't have been that hard, then I wouldn't have survived. Then I'd gone back and went right back into it, because this wasn't that bad. It was 30 days of it, but it was it was the hardest period, right? And so it made me have to do things a certain way, but it still comes down to a choice, right? It's what do we choose to do with the hardships in life and the loss in life and the things that we struggle with, and how do we cope, right? Do we, pretend like it's not that big of a deal, and shove it inside, which, I'll, again, readily admit, a lot of things in life I can just bear down and move forward. And maybe that's a lesson, for me, because this just, broke me in half. And so I think that's another piece, that I want to maybe improve on as a human, is the, I think part of this podcast, is to, I can go in a survival mode. I can go through things solo and alone and make it through, you know, probably more difficult things than most people can. But that doesn't mean you should, right? It's like, you know, I can grind it out. I can do it. We tell athletes that just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? Because there's usually, you know, it's use your resiliency and your stubbornness for good, right? Not for, and when you need it, not as like a daily crutch, right? And I know that's something that I tend to fall back on. It's like, I can handle it, you know, but a lot of life you're not meant to handle, right? Like, you know, we have that, and I think you have a lot of that in you too. Is like, you know, to handle things on your own and handle our business, and you know,
sure.
and it's not a strength. It's a strength until you're broken, right? Until you realize you can't do everything by yourself, and how important community and fellowship and other people are, and conversations, and you know, again, it's like it's not a sign of weakness to ask for help. You know, it's and that's just a message for everyone, I think, is to tell people you're having a hard time, like just directly. I'm having a hard time, right? You know, you see sometimes vague Facebook posts, you know, that you can tell someone's kind of asking for help, just kind of indirectly, you know, or text messages, but it's like asking for help is, you got to, you know, and having the, which is basically what I was saying in my email this week to my team, was like, you know, I just cut me some slack. I'm going to need some time, right? I'm going to be out of it. I'm going to be hurting. I'm going to be struggling. That's where I am, you know, instead of, you know, I'll be fine. I can keep doing this. It's like, because it also, it does myself a disservice. And I think it does the loss and the coping a disservice as well. Not giving myself enough time and opportunity to grieve and to do things, and to feel things, right? Which I think is a huge part of this sport, of why people love it so much, because it brings emotion out of you that you might not feel otherwise, right? Like we spend so much time, so much of our life trying to, think, like, suppress emotion, right? Because it's you're unstable, or you're hurt, or you're too weak. We all have it, right? You know, and I think by simultaneously pushing ourselves physically, it removes, I know this for me, as I was on the bike this morning, like shedding some tears, like for whatever reason, like the bike is where I go to grieve. I just hop on it and I can cry, I can do whatever. But I think what training and triathlon and what Ironman does, and you see this in races and people's finish line and whatever, is that the energy and the effort that's being asked of us physically removes that same energy and effort it takes for us to suppress our emotions that we're so used to doing. And that's why you see people at the end of these races, or even the beginning of it, or at the end, just break down, because you finally, right, you know, you've got this plug, you know, on the drain of your emotions and mental, that's being held down by all this energy and effort. But now you got to use that to, like, do, you know, 70.3, 140. And then it's like, oh, now it's starting to come out. And I'm like, oh shit. And because once it pops. Like, there's no getting it back in. Like, 'cause once you let out, you know, so, and that's why I think people love the sport, right? It is the outlet that it gives us, and the opportunities that it presents for us to grow, again, not just physically, but to figure things out emotionally and mentally in a much healthier way, right? Than hitting up the bar, or, you know, swiping left on Tinder. Mm-hmm. If that's the way you swipe, I'm not sure. Swipe right, maybe.
Yeah, that can solve a lot of problems, I suppose. You know, as you're talking about, like, rock bottom, the image that comes to my mind with stuff like that is how we battle through, and, you know, like, it's almost like a funnel, right? And you think of, like, a marble kind of spinning around it and, like, slowly making its way to the bottom. I feel like we always can come up with new, you know, energies to kind of keep that marble from dropping, and it takes forever. It's sort of like a self-sabotage cycle that just keeps getting more and more momentum, because it sort of lifts you out a while. And I think about that in terms of training sometimes. It's like, you know, we can get through it and we just keep pushing. And it's like, you know, like you're saying, if you're sick, just take some time or rest. You can tell when you're in those training cycles where you're just digging a deeper hole, but you're kind of climbing out of it and then getting back in, and over and over and over. And sometimes, like you said, you know, you just got to ask somebody for help. And I think that can be yourself, you know, give yourself some grace or whatever, and back off a little bit, because you know, that's why we talk about like burning matches, or how many weeks a year we can spend in like quote unquote this peak phase or something like that. And sometimes I think these peak phases creep up when you least expect it, and you're really wore down or whatever the case may be. So, you know, it's time to, you know, and you just kind of talked about it with, you know, what we're going to talk about next time. But, you know, if you want to dig deep and really get into that well and stuff like that, I mean, that's kind of a race day thing a lot of times, you know. You shouldn't be doing that 52 weeks a year, you know, sucking it up to just do another one and do another, because that's what I got to do to get to this thing. You know, how many times you see athletes, they'll have like a massive weekend, you know, 8 weeks away, and basically authenticate that they can handle the distance, you know, but still have to just keep grinding, because they can't, you know, they can't, you know, sort of turn that into confidence, instead of just always wanting to like get perfection or something like that.
Yeah.
And so anyway, it's just been a wake up call in a lot of ways for me as well. And
I think, you know, I mean, interrupt, but
that's all right.
You know, I think one of the things that, you know, again, we'll talk about this on Thursday, was just that, you know, I think everyone's out to make things easier, right? Like we things aren't really ever invented that makes things harder, right? Like if there's 2 books on the shelf, that's like the 16-hour consistent athlete or the 8-hour athlete, you're going to do the 8-hour, right? It's like nothing, you know. And I think in one of the things that we did with our athletes for Texas was I told them for basically a week, it's going to be really fucking hard. Like it's going to be really, 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 really hard, which I think a lot of times people are like, it might psych them out. It might be, you know, tell them like, no, it's going to be fucking hard. Like it's going to be really hot and really windy, and
they all are, you
right.
know?
Yeah. They all are, but it's like, I think we need a reminder that life is really, 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 really hard. So is training, and to expect perfection out of yourself, right, all the time is too much, right? It's too much. But also you hear this a lot. I think that's where I was trying to go and maybe end it was, I think, especially with athletes, that the kind of tradition of, you know, I don't know why I can't get it together, or I'm not motivated, or I'm not doing this. You know, what does that say about me? When it says you're human, right? Like it says you're not a robot. You know, that we all have periods of ups and downs and triumphs and victories. Like literally everyone has it. And if you don't, you're not participating in the rest of this world, right? Like what we're doing. Like if you haven't suffered loss or suffered losses, you ain't doing enough, right? You know, the best athletes on the planet also have a lot of losses, right? Because they play a lot, right? You know, if you want to go undefeated, go to your local neighborhood 5K, train for a year, do it, and then never race again, right? It's gonna be your only win. You know, again, we all have losses, we all have struggle, and I think you'd be surprised how many times I tell athletes, you know, hey, are you talking to somebody? Yeah, I'm talking to go see a therapist. Go see a fucking therapist. Like I don't know why people don't see them. Like it's not that you're weak. It's that we all need someone, you know, that's, you know, that we can talk to. You know, I even told one athlete last year, I'm not putting any more training in your training peaks until you tell me you're going to talk to somebody, you know, because again, it's about overall, like we always talk about health and happiness, that comes before performance. And if you want performance, you got to get happiness and healthy, be happy and healthy, because you're not going to get it from a disappointed, depressed, upset, torn apart athlete, you know? And I think, unfortunately, that's
adrenaline wears off, man.
It does. It's
something deeper always.
It's futile to fight, you know, to bury yourself in training and to pretend, you know, and speaking from experience, I did it for 2 years before I got sober. I buried myself in training to try and just do it and just survive. It is not sustainable. And when the crash happens, it is severe. And so if you find yourself in that, space, make some changes, be courageous in asking for help, and then do your best to be proactive in doing something about it, and it's never too late to ask for help. It's never too late to ask for assistance. It's not an indictment on your inability to be motivated or committed or to figure your life out. Or you hear that a lot. I can't just figure your life out. It's not that easy, right? It's like, tell people diseases, or things that come down like, why can't you just get rid of that? They just can't, right? It's like, it's life. We can't get rid of it. We can just do our best to get through it. And the best way to get through it is to get through it together. Right. And not do it alone, and ask for help. And so that's my, that's it. That's our, commemorative, we will probably, you'll title the podcast. You always title them. Something about Kona. And so if you tuned in for tips on how to get to Kona, you failed. It's it's just one of those things. And again, like, I'm super appreciative and grateful that, and this has been a great thing for me to do personally, is to talk about it openly and vulnerably and, get choked up and, but to have a platform like that, that I can go back to and maybe listen to one day, like 5 years from now when I can handle it, where there's always lessons, right? And I think that by sharing, by openly and honestly sharing our experiences, that we can provide opportunities for people to do the same. And that, I think, is one of the best things that's ever come out of our podcast, is the times we've been vulnerable, because that allows other people to be vulnerable as well. So be vulnerable, people. Don't be strong today. Be vulnerable. As always, we love you. We appreciate you. If you've made it this far, just tell people it's the pollen. That's why your eyes are red, because the hood of my car is yellow. And to all the people that left messages on my Facebook page or have sent texts and emails, I'll just be frank. I don't have the energy to respond to all of them. And I don't want to send, hey, thanks, I appreciate it, because it doesn't do it justice. But just know that I love you and I appreciate you. And it means a lot to be looked on and looked after, and checked in on. So I appreciate that, very, very much. As always, go to our website, c26triathlon.com. It's our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. Check out our gear. It is flying off the shelf. We got some new lids, I think is what the kids call it. New visors and hats that came in, and they are going fast. So check that out. Go to the website, go to the online store, and hop on it. Do we have any swim caps left? Are they gone? Yeah, not a lot. So get on those. We got some sweet C26 swim caps and a bunch of other gear. And we'll also be at the Chattanooga 70.3 Expo next month, selling gear and looking forward to hanging out and seeing people. If you're looking for coaching for the rest of the year, always click on our coaching tab and peruse our roster of coaches. And then always, if you need anything from Mike, you can get hold of him, CrushingIron@gmail.com. And if you need anything from me specifically, I'm available at C26coach@gmail.com.
All right. I love you, buddy.
You too.